There's something quietly happening behind closed doors in the lives of millions of seniors over 60 that no one really talks about. And it's not about medications or mobility. It's about the slow, silent shutdown of the body's most intimate system simply because of the belief that sex or self-pleasure no longer matters at this age. But the truth is, medical experts, especially urologists, are now warning that if you completely stop masturbating after 60, your body will start to experience a surprising cascade of changes that can affect not only your physical health, but your emotional well-being, cognitive sharpness, and even the way your organs function day to day. Because you see, what once seemed like a private act of youthful indulgence is now being re-examined in the world of senior health as an important maintenance function of the body. Yes, maintenance, much like stretching your muscles or brushing your teeth. And ignoring this part of your life can lead to subtle but serious consequences like the stiffening of pelvic floor muscles, poor circulation in the reproductive system, and even early signs of incontinence and erectile dysfunction in men or vaginal atrophy and dryness in women, all of which contribute to a loss of confidence, vitality, and connection to one's own body. And the reason this happens isn't just because of age, but because the body responds to disuse in the same way it would if you stopped walking for weeks. Atrophy begins, hormones drop, nerves become less responsive, and circulation diminishes, which is why urologists have started encouraging seniors to treat masturbation not as something shameful or inappropriate for their age, but as a gentle, beneficial act of self-care that keeps the sexual and urinary systems functioning smoothly. And it's not about chasing pleasure or pretending to be young again. It's about maintaining healthy levels of nitric oxide for men, which helps keep blood vessels open and flexible or sustaining. Vaginal elasticity and lubrication for women, which reduces painful urination, itching, and the risk of urinary tract infections. And what's even more astonishing is that regular, gentle self-stimulation also promotes better sleep, reduced anxiety, improved memory, and even increased immunity thanks to the endorphins and oxytocin released during climax, which play a profound role in reducing inflammation and cortisol levels in the body. And yet, despite all these benefits, countless seniors silently give it up, often because of myths and shame left over from old cultural ideas that told us aging bodies should be quiet, invisible, or even celibate. But modern science is rewriting this narrative, showing us that the body, regardless of age, still thrives when touch, arousal, and release are allowed to exist, especially in a private, safe, and healthy way that respects personal boundaries and comfort. And it doesn't require anything extreme or graphic, just the awareness that keeping these pathways active even just once or twice a week can prevent the slow degeneration of muscles and nerves in the pelvic region, support bladder control, and preserve intimacy whether or not you have a partner. And yes, even seniors in their 70s, 80s, and beyond have reported that regular solo intimacy has helped them feel more alive, sleep better, and experience fewer urinary issues. And this is not coming from tabloids or internet rumors, but from board-certified urologists who've seen again and again how neglect in this area leads to unnecessary health declines, and how reintroducing this basic act of self-care with proper comfort, privacy, and intention can radically improve the daily experience of aging. And while it may feel strange to bring up at first, more elderly patients are finally asking their doctors honest questions like, Is it okay if I still do this? Or why do I feel better afterward? And the answer is yes. Not only is it okay, it may be one of the most underutilized tools for maintaining urogenital health, reducing urinary urgency, and improving overall pelvic function as we age. Because the human body does not lose its need for circulation, muscle tone, and hormonal flow simply because a birthday came and went. And in fact, ignoring those needs sends a signal to your brain that those systems are no longer important, and your brain, always trying to be efficient, begins slowly shutting down the pathways, nerve signals, and hormone production that keep those systems healthy, which can lead to what some describe as a sense of dullness, lower drive, irritability, and even depression. And this is particularly true for older men whose testosterone production is closely tied to frequency of arousal and release, as well as for postmenopausal women who find that gentle stimulation helps reduce dryness, supports urinary control, and even helps prevent pelvic prolapse by keeping the inner muscles toned and responsive. And none of this is to suggest that it's a magic cure or that it must be done in a certain way or amount. It's simply about staying connected to a part of yourself that still functions, still needs attention, and still plays a role in your overall well-being, just like walking, stretching, or breathing exercises. And when we reframe it as a maintenance tool instead of something secret or shameful, we give ourselves permission to age with dignity, with vitality, and with a kind of inner lightness that so many seniors say they thought they'd lost forever, only to discover that reconnecting with themselves in this private, healthy way gave them a surprising sense of youth, comfort, and calm that no pill ever could. And it's worth asking, what if this simple act could help you sleep better, pee with more control, reduce brain fog, and lift your mood? Because what happens next when this part of the body is neglected is not always dramatic at first, but can be quietly disruptive. Trouble initiating urination, more frequent nighttime bathroom visits, difficulty achieving full emptying of the bladder, and even a rise in urinary tract infections, particularly for women whose vaginal tissues, once unsupported by regular blood flow and natural lubrication, become more susceptible to irritation, bacterial imbalance, and pain. And this is something urologists have become increasingly vocal about, especially as more elderly patients come in with these issues, assuming they're just part of normal aging, when in fact they're often connected to disuse of the sexual organs entirely. And when seniors are guided to gently reconnect with themselves through self-touch, through awareness, through allowing arousal without guilt, many report a stunning improvement not only in bladder control, but in mood, energy, and clarity of mind. And these benefits aren't imagined. They're backed by brain imaging studies that show that orgasm activates more than a dozen areas of the brain involved in memory, reward, and emotional regulation. Meaning that something as simple as private, safe stimulation can help maintain cognitive sharpness and reduce the buildup of stress-related hormones that are often linked with inflammation, insomnia, and even cardiovascular risk. And the beauty of this is that it doesn't require a partner, doesn't require performance, and doesn't even require any elaborate setup. It's just a matter of making space for the body to express its natural rhythm. And for many seniors who live alone or feel disconnected from their physical selves, this small but powerful act becomes a way to reclaim the relationship with their own body, to remind themselves that they are still alive, still capable, still human in every sense. And this psychological component should not be overlooked because loss of sexual expression or even the loss of simple intimate touch can often lead to a sense of emotional isolation, which in turn raises the risk of depression, memory decline, and even earlier mortality, as countless studies now show that loneliness and touch deprivation are just as dangerous to the aging body as smoking or obesity, which is why encouraging healthy, respectful forms of self-touch in older adults is no longer seen as taboo in the medical world, but increasingly viewed as a necessary part of holistic aging. And for men, the benefits of continued arousal include maintaining stronger erections due to better blood flow, more stable testosterone levels, which impact everything from muscle mass to motivation, and a reduced risk of prostate congestion, a term urologists use to describe the accumulation of fluids in the prostate from lack of release, which in some cases can lead to discomfort or even inflammation. And for women, the act of masturbation supports stronger pelvic muscles, helps prevent painful intercourse for those still sexually active, and reduces the risk of pelvic floor disorders that can contribute to bladder leakage, organ prolapse, and discomfort during daily movements like walking or standing. And what's even more encouraging is that these benefits don't require high frequency. Just once or twice a week is often enough to keep the blood vessels, nerves, and tissues in the region stimulated, responsive, and oxygenated, which contributes to better overall circulation throughout the lower body and helps preserve neurological pathways involved in balance, bladder control, and even digestion because the pelvic region is not isolated. It connects deeply to many other systems through nerves, fascia, and vascular pathways, so keeping alive and well has ripple effects far beyond the bedroom. And when seniors feel empowered to ask questions about this, to explore gently and without shame, and to view their sexual health as an integral part of their overall health, the results can be deeply transformative, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And yet so many still live in quiet fear or embarrassment around this topic, worried that they'll be judged or told they're too old to think about such things, when in fact, age has nothing to do with the body's need for circulation, hormonal flow, or the simple comfort of release. And for those struggling with grief, chronic illness, or years of sexual silence, it can feel awkward or even sad to begin. Again, but the act itself, when approached with kindness and patience, becomes less about seeking pleasure and more about honoring what the body still wants, still feels, still needs to function at its best. And it's never too late to begin. Even seniors who haven't touched themselves in years or decades can slowly reintroduce sensation with the help of warm baths, gentle breath work, or even simply resting a hand over their abdomen and reconnecting with the sensation of aliveness there. And over time, the nerves respond, the circulation returns, the tissues soften and awaken. And with it comes a subtle lift in energy, resilience, and even dignity, because aging does not mean becoming invisible or disconnected. It means learning how to care for yourself with a deeper respect. And for many, that includes the courage to reclaim what was once given up, not out of desire, but out of cultural pressure or discomfort. And now, with the support of modern science and compassionate healthcare, it becomes possible again to say yes to the parts of yourself that still want attention. And that includes the right to touch, to feel, and to awaken the systems of the body that rely on stimulation to survive. because without it, those systems fade, not just anatomically, but emotionally. And that kind of fading, slow, unnoticed, and preventable is exactly what urologists want to help seniors avoid, because they've seen it firsthand. The man whose nightly urges disappeared and took his confidence. With them, the woman who assumed vaginal dryness was a life sentence until she began reconnecting and rediscovered comfort she hadn't known in years. The widow who thought she was done with pleasure only to find that gentle, mindful self-touch helped her sleep for the first time in weeks. And these are not fringe stories. They're everyday examples of how the human body responds to even the simplest acts of care and attention, no matter what the age, and the research is only growing, with geriatric specialists, pelvic floor therapists, and even neurologists now exploring how regular, non-performative sexual stimulation supports brain health, hormone regulation, and tissue preservation in older adults. And if that sounds surprising, it's only because society hasn't allowed this conversation to grow until now. But today's seniors are living longer than ever, and it's no longer enough to just survive. They want to thrive, and part of that thriving involves listening to the bodies, quieter needs, and acknowledging that yes, even now, even here, even in the 7th, 8th, or 9th decade of life, this part of you still matters, still works, and still needs you. And what's perhaps most touching is that the more seniors begin to gently reclaim this forgotten territory, the more they realize it was never about sexuality in the conventional sense at all. It was about presence, about staying connected to the parts of themselves that still feel alive, about the deeply human need for touch, not just from others, but from within. And this shift in perspective changes everything, because instead of thinking of masturbation as something awkward, indulgent, or taboo, it becomes simply another form of self-care, no different than taking vitamins or doing light stretches in the morning to preserve flexibility and strength. And when this understanding takes root, something beautiful happens. Shame softens, anxiety fades, and the nervous system begins to settle into a calmer, more regulated rhythm, which in turn impacts everything from blood pressure to heart rate to the release of important neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin that help stabilize mood and improve focus. And this is especially important in the context of aging, because as we grow older, the body begins to rely more on natural stimulants to keep systems functioning optimally. And regular, intentional stimulation of the pelvic area is one such stimulant that has been largely overlooked by the mainstream medical conversation until now. But urologists, pelvic floor therapists, and even gerontologists are now beginning to agree that just like movement prevents joint stiffness, regular gentle stimulation prevents the slow, creeping degeneration of urogenital tissues and nerves that often leads to reduced bladder control, constipation, decreased libido, painful urination, and a disconnect between brain and body that accelerates cognitive and emotional decline. And when seniors are given the right support, education, and tools to explore this area safely, without the pressure to perform, without the weight of cultural baggage, they often rediscover not only sensation and comfort, but an entire layer of identity they thought had been erased by time. And this rediscovery has ripple effects far beyond the physical body, because it reignites a sense of personal agency, a feeling that I still matter, I can still feel good, I'm still capable of giving myself care. And those statements carry profound psychological power, especially for those who may be living alone, grieving a partner, or adjusting to a life stage where touch from others has become rare or entirely absent. And in that vacuum, masturbation becomes less about pleasure and more about affirmation, an affirmation that the body still belongs to you, that it still functions in beautiful, resilient ways, and that even if society doesn't talk about it, your own lived experience proves that aging doesn't mean shutting down. It means adjusting, listening, adapting, and staying curious. And that curiosity, that willingness to feel, to awaken, to nurture parts of yourself that have been neglected, can be the very thing that prevents more serious issues from arising down the line, like stress incontinence from weak pelvic muscles, loss of circulation in the reproductive region, hormonal flattening that leads to persistent fatigue or sadness, and even issues with sleep regulation and digestion, all of which are impacted by the nervous system's relationship to pleasure and relaxation. And while this might seem like a stretch at first, the truth is the body doesn't compartmentalize joy or touch the way culture does. Your nervous system doesn't know whether you're 25 or 75 when you engage in self-touch. It simply responds with hormonal cascades and neurological feedback that improve your baseline state, which is why seniors who incorporate mindful solo intimacy often report subtle but measurable improvements in energy, posture, mobility, and even social engagement, because they're not carrying the heaviness of isolation or repression in their bodies anymore. And instead of feeling shut down or disembodied, they feel lighter, more open, more attuned to their own needs, and more able to participate in life from a place of groundedness rather than silent tension. And this change, though small at first, builds over time. The woman who once winced every time she sat down because of vaginal dryness now walks more freely because her tissues are hydrated and healthy again. The man who was waking 4 times a night to urinate now sleeps through until morning because his pelvic floor is stronger and his prostate no longer feels congested. The couple who thought their intimacy was over now hold hands again and talk about their bodies without shame. And all of this came not from medications or surgeries, but from a simple shift in mindset and a gentle return to self. And it's worth saying again, there is no right or wrong way to do this, no schedule, no technique, no rule book, only the invitation to explore slowly, kindly, and without expectation, because the goal isn't performance or climax, but connection. And that connection can be as simple as a few quiet moments of breath and touch, of learning what your body responds to, what brings ease or warmth or softness, and giving yourself permission to move in that direction without judgment. And when that happens, the results are often quietly profound, not just in the physical health markers that improve, but in the emotional resilience that returns, because feeling good in your body is not a luxury. It's a basic foundation for health. And when that foundation is nurtured, everything else becomes more manageable. Stress feels smaller, aches feel less consuming. Even the challenges of aging feel more navigable because you're not carrying the invisible weight of disconnection anymore. And for seniors especially, who are often told what to take, what to avoid, what not to do, reclaiming this one area of bodily autonomy can feel like a quiet revolution. A reclaiming of personal agency, of dignity, of joy that doesn't depend on youth or partnership or anyone else's permission. And that's why more and more healthcare providers are beginning to speak openly about this, encouraging seniors to see masturbation not as something to be embarrassed about, but as something that supports health, reduces risk, and helps maintain quality of life for years longer than previously thought possible, especially when combined with other forms of gentle movement, emotional support, and mindful aging practices. And it may sound bold, even controversial, but the evidence is clear. The body does better when it is loved, even if that love comes from your own hands in the privacy of your own home. And that's not something to hide from, but something to celebrate as part of the broader, richer picture of what aging well can truly look like. And perhaps what makes this subject so urgent now, more than ever before, is the fact that so many seniors are silently suffering, not from dramatic health conditions, but from the slow erosion of vitality that comes from disconnection, disuse, and shame buried deep within the body. And when we finally peel back the layers of taboo, of generational silence, of cultural discomfort around elderly sexuality, what we're left with is something so profoundly human that it almost defies language. A simple truth that touch matters, that pleasure matters, that acknowledging your own desire to feel warmth and intimacy and sensation isn't a selfish act, but a healing one. And in the face of an aging process that so often strips people of control over their time, their bodies, their independence, this one area of autonomy can become a cornerstone of empowerment, because you don't need anyone else's permission to rediscover what feels good to you. And that might mean a return to something you used to enjoy but felt you had to give up. Or it might mean a new beginning altogether, where you approach your own body with the same curiosity and compassion you'd offer a dear friend. Because aging does not have to mean the death of curiosity or connection. In fact, it can be the start of a deeper, more mindful relationship with the self, one built not on performance or fantasy, but on the real, grounding benefits of presence, care, and the deliberate act of awakening sensation where it has long been numb. And for many elderly people, the benefits of regular masturbation extend far beyond the physical. They include better digestion, more regulated appetite, improved lymphatic flow, lower stress levels, and most notably, a profound reduction in feelings of loneliness. And this is not some accidental side effect, but a real consequence of what happens when the body is touched with attention and respect. Because touch stimulates oxytocin, the hormone of bonding, of comfort, of belonging. And when seniors stimulate their own bodies and experience that hormonal response, they're not just creating pleasure. They're actually soothing their nervous systems, reinforcing the sense that they are safe, connected, and still deserving of love, even if that love comes through their own fingertips. And that kind of deep nervous system comfort has measurable effects. It leads to lower cortisol levels, which can decrease inflammation throughout the body, improve memory retention, and reduce the physical wear and tear that accelerates aging. And this might be one of the most radical, yet gentle truths in all of health. That pleasure, real pleasure, offered without judgment, is regenerative. And that for someone over 60, over 70, or even into their 80s or 90s, that regeneration might be the key to maintaining independence, clarity, and emotional resilience in the face of life's inevitable losses. And yet so many suffer in silence, either believing their bodies are too far gone to feel good again, or fearing that if they explore this, they'll be judged, misunderstood, or worse, dismissed by those closest to them. And this is where society must catch up to the reality, because every day, more elderly people are awakening to their own needs again, having conversations with compassionate healthcare providers, learning that their dryness can be treated, that their blood flow can be restored, that their nerves are still responsive, and perhaps most importantly, that they are not alone, because this is no longer a fringe topic reserved for whispered questions. It is becoming a fundamental part of senior wellness, and for good reason, because we now understand that the same body systems that control arousal also regulate bladder function, mobility, core strength, and even emotional flexibility, meaning that when an elder chooses to engage in solo intimacy, they're not just satisfying a private itch, they're engaging in a form of nervous system tuning, of hormonal rebalancing, of mind-body healing that offers support in areas often overlooked by modern medicine. And it's in these small, consistent choices, lighting a candle, playing calming music, sitting or lying in comfort, touching oneself without shame or rush, that so many seniors rediscover not only physical health, but emotional strength, because once the fear and guilt have been dissolved, what remains is peace, a quiet pride in knowing that you can meet your own needs, even at this stage in life. And this peace radiates outward into how seniors move, how they carry themselves, how they eat, how they interact with family, and how they face each new day with a little more confidence, knowing they're not broken, not dried up, not cast aside, but still capable of beauty, of joy, of pleasure, and of deep personal intimacy. And this is why the message must be repeated again and again. That masturbation after 60 is not dirty, not shameful, not useless, but in fact incredibly useful, incredibly healing, and incredibly necessary for those who wish to thrive and not just survive in their later years. And it doesn't require advanced techniques or any kind of external tools. It just requires permission, the kind you give yourself to approach your body with openness and care, to experiment slowly, to listen to what feels good and what doesn't, and to make a habit not of ignoring your body's signals, but of responding with compassion. And when that becomes the practice, whether once a week or daily, the benefits grow subtly at first and then steadily as circulation improves, as tension melts, as sleep deepens, as energy returns, and as joy trickles back into moments that used to feel dull or disconnected. And in a world where so many seniors are told what they can't do, what they've lost, or what will never come back, this simple act stands as a quiet form of resistance, a reminder that not everything is behind you, and that in fact, some of the deepest forms of connection, peace, and health are still available to you, waiting patiently in the background, needing only your attention to come alive. So to those listening right now who have felt disconnected from this part of themselves, or ashamed to even consider that they might still want or need this, hear this loud and clear. You're not alone, you're not wrong, and you're not too old to feel good in your body again. And the more you listen, the more you explore, the more you trust that your needs matter, the more this neglected part of life begins to bloom again. Not because anyone else told you to do it, but because deep down, you remembered what it means to care for yourself fully, gently, and without apology. And if this conversation opens something in you, even just a little, take a moment tonight to sit with that feeling, to honor it, to let it guide you toward a new beginning, one that is shaped not by age, but by awareness, And if you found this helpful, if this spoke to something you felt but never had words for, make sure to stay with us here, because these are the kinds of real, respectful, and life-changing conversations we continue to have, always with your health, comfort, and dignity in mind, because you deserve nothing less than to thrive in every way possible.